Michael Tyner is an acclaimed producer and director known for his award-winning scripted and documentary content highlighting music, culture, and transformative narratives. He made his directorial debut with Malcolmology, a nationally broadcast 6-part documentary series based on Dr. Manning Marable's Pulitzer Prize-winning biography, Malcolm X, A Life of Reinvention. Tyner has been a producer consultant on several significant projects, including Netflix's 2020 docuseries, Who Killed Malcolm X?
Tyner has also worked in the scripted space. He is the co-founder of Truth to Power Films, and with Emmy-nominated director Kareem Lopez, Tyner produced 5 short films. Jake, Tyner's scripted director debut, premiered at the Pan-African Film Festival and won awards at the San Francisco Black Film Festival and the Denton Black Film Festival. Tyner went on to produce Target is Hiring, a short film by Bronx-born award-winning director Joel Vargas. Target is Hiring premiered at Tribeca Film Festival. Joel's latest project, Mad Bills to Pay, is set to premiere at Sundance 2025.
As Director of Development and Production at La Luta Productions, Tyner has overseen the creation of numerous documentaries, including Frank Serpico and Roberta, which premiered on Hulu and American Masters PBS, respectively, and continue to screen globally. Tyner's most recent film, The People's Way, a poignant story about 3 activists fighting for justice in the wake of George Floyd's murder, premiered at Doc NYC. Currently, Tyner is developing Play Like McCoy, the story of the legendary jazz pianist McCoy Tyner.
Michael?
Who is this guy? He sounds very impressive.
Yeah, I think he does, man. Thank you so much for joining us.
Interviewing him? You should.
Yes.
Wanted to book him for months.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us, Uptown Films.
Of course.
How
Thanks
you
for
doing
having
today?
me.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. So let's get into it. Uptown Films.
So I don't want to commandeer the interview, but I have to ask. So we all thought that this was a family project. We quickly found out that it is not.
How dare you lie to us, Mike?
Yes. I mean, you know, we that's what everybody thinks. So
Yeah.
You're not alone. And we're actually not sure. We actually could be related.
We had like a few questions ready about this. It was like, okay.
Yeah, but I will say, I met Ashley, I don't know, that might have been like 5 years ago. And we actually met because she was interested in making a documentary about my uncle, McCoy Tyner. And so she contacted my cousin, another Tyner, Neurodean Tyner, and then Neurodean put me in touch with Ashley, like, oh, she wants to. I was already starting to develop the documentary, and so talked to Ashley, and her idea was I might be related to McCoy Tyner, but I don't know. And so yeah, we talked. We ended up doing some work together on that project, but my uncle passed away in 2020. Like right before COVID, and so we kind of paused that project, and Ashley ended up going with her brother Will to Minneapolis at that time, and they went there, not necessarily thinking that they were going to make a full documentary.
Right.
Really wanted to get plugged into the movement. And they really did, and they started. Will is a award-winning cinematographer, filmmaker, and Ashley also just like a storyteller who just has like really good vision, really artistic, and together they shot over, 3-4 years,
Wow.
and I mean, they really did the bulk of the work for this project. I ended up coming in after they had shot a good amount of the film, and they had a rough cut of some scenes together. And Ash was like, "Here, what do you think?" I was like, "This is fucking amazing." Oh, am I allowed to curse?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Curse as much as you want. Go for it.
I asked for forgiveness, right? Just
I-
Yeah.
hit the F-bomb hard, and then I have to be like, all right. Is that cool? So, and then she, I was like, well, y'all need help?
Yeah.
They're like, we don't have a producer. I was like,
I got you. Yeah.
Nice. Nice.
But yeah, funny thing though is we don't know if we're related, but our my grandmother grew up in Hosky, North Carolina, and her family, they traced their family also back to Ahoskie, and right next to Ahoskie, there's actually a township called Tyner.
Oh, shit.
Wow.
And so,
Wow.
and if you go to Tyner, what do you think? What kind of crops do you think are there?
Probably a lot of cotton.
Hell, yeah. All right. Whole lot of cotton.
Yeah.
So our
Yeah,
assumption
right.
is that we're at least from the same plantation.
Right.
Yeah, tracing your roots, man.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
Yeah. So it's funny where we laugh about the next project.
Wow.
Being like, are we related?
Yeah. This might be.
That might be the title right there.
Yeah, I know. Are we
Or
related?
Tyner.
Right.
Honestly, I mean, that could be a documentary in itself.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
just the whole tracing back the
Next project.
heritage and the reconnection. Wow, that is so funny. How many Tyners are there? It sounds like there's a lot.
Yeah, well, it's so we have on Facebook. There's a Facebook group called Tribe of Tyners, and just everybody who got and it's only for the Black Tyners, by the way. Sorry, white Tyners. Sorry, white Tyners. This is about us. And yeah, everybody's in. Everybody just be like, oh yeah, just all the Black Tyners. And so
How many people in the group?
that's a good question. Last time I checked, it was definitely like 200-300.
Wow.
There's a lot of Tyners in Minneapolis actually, who we actually haven't connected with them out there. And then they're all over though. They're in North Carolina. There's a lot.
Nice. Nice.
I feel like that's definitely worth a documentary
Yeah,
project.
exactly.
For real.
Yes.
I was personally wondering, you talked briefly about them going out to Minneapolis, and did they have any connections out there? How did those form? Like, how did they stay out there for 4 years, whatever,
Yeah. So I actually don't know how many people they knew when they first went out there, but I can say that they both at the time were working remotely. I mean, everybody was.
Right,
essentially.
right,
And
okay.
So,
Yeah.
and they're just like, they're about that shit, right? They're about like Black liberation.
Yeah.
Nice.
And
Community action.
and community
yeah.
action. And so they, I think for them, it was really just like, yo, this what's going on is jacked up and I want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And they figured out how to do it while still being able to, so they like got apartments out there.
Wow. Like fully uprooted their lives,
Dedication.
went over and did that.
Yes,
Wow.
Yes. And and I know that it wasn't easy the whole time.
I
right?
can
Like, it
imagine,
was,
yeah.
And I know there were times when I think money was pretty tight for them, but they have a vision. And really, when we did the premiere at Doc NYC, the 3 women that we feature in the film, Toshira, Janelle, and Robin, all came out.
Wow. That's
And
awesome.
What you heard from them was how much trust was built between the filmmakers and the people that they decided to feature in the film. And it's interesting, right? Because their first time, this is their first documentary.
Oh, wow.
And
They killed it.
They won.
did.
Y'all killed
Fucking
it. Right?
killed it.
One, y'all killed it.
Absolutely.
They really kicked ass. With
Yeah.
Yeah,
Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible.
And it's interesting. I think about like if I was there when they first started, how the process would have been different. And I think we still would have made a brilliant film. But what's interesting is that I think they're sort of they did things that typically you would not do as a documentarian. Like one of the things that I've always struggled with is when you're filming, when you're trying to profile somebody or get their entire story, how much do you interject, right? And especially when you're doing stuff that's like social justice. One of the early documentaries I worked on, actually, it never really. I made a short out of it, but I was always wanted to make a feature. Was when Katrina happened. I actually went down there. I was teaching at the time, and I went down with a group of 15 students, and we went to the Lower Ninth Ward, and we gutted homes, and worked with the community members there.
Nice.
And I'm essentially filming it myself at a DVX 100, Panasonic DVX 100. Yeah, that was that joint back in the day.
DV cameras, hell yeah, bro.
That mini DV joint. Went down there, filmed. And it's interesting because I'm like, I was passionate about helping the people. And so when you put down the camera, and I would do it all the time, so I'm like, I can't just sit here and watch people work. And, so I did both. But I think Ash and Will took that to the next level. Like, not only would they put down the camera at the appropriate times, but they went through all the training that you go through that like if you were working with that community group, you go through. Right. And they went through all that and would put down the camera and help when needed. So yeah, maybe you didn't get the shot, but for them, that wasn't, necessarily the priority. So, and I credit that to them, obviously who they are, but then also the fact that, when you do this documentary work all the time, like sometimes you turn into, you're more of a machine with it, right? You're just
of course,
I'm trying to get the shot, because you know how hard it's going to be in post, right?
Right.
Like,
and on top of that, like there's like the ethical distance, like in terms of like, doc is an art form. It's on one hand, it's self-expression, but on another hand, it's reportage. You can't dilute the evidence, the material. It's really tricky stuff. I was wondering, I don't know, in light of what we have to look forward to, there was those reports of Donald Trump claiming to give police immunity, and in terms of this doc, what do you anticipate or what do you desire the response to this to be? Hopefully,
yeah. I mean,
hate to get too grim with it, but
I know I'm like
Too real.
yeah,
it's yeah. I mean, I think one of the things, one of the like through lines of the film is that, and we don't talk about it in the film, but you see it. You see as they fight to get justice for one person, somebody else dies.
yeah.
Right? And it actually, if you watch the film, it almost lines up to the acts, right? Dante, right?
100%.
Right?
right.
Like, so you sort of see it.
Yeah.
And it's almost like every step forward is that is
One step
another
back
murder.
almost.
Yeah.
And I think that when I think about sort of the future, right? I think it's pretty clear we're going into some dark days.
Yeah.
Everybody pack your bags.
Hey.
But like, the idea there is that no matter what these characters, and these characters are in the thick of it, and I shouldn't call them characters, they're real people, right? Like
Yeah.
Robin, Toshira, Janelle are in the thick of it.
Yeah.
And they don't lose their there's more to fight. There's more people that they have to hold, right? Toshira has to now, has even more grieving mothers
Every day. It
every
seems
day
like.
that she has to,
Yeah.
that's part of her work of like, but in that space, there's also the will to heal and the will to really connect with your community. And look, the history of African Americans in this country has not been, has been riddled with trauma.
Yeah.
We deal with this every day. And so the idea is really what do we do to keep pushing forward? And I think the answer is there's answers in the film, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
People are going do things in different ways,
Right.
to keep us going forward. And this is going to happen under Trump. It would have happened under Kamala.
Right.
This violence is happening no matter what.
Yeah.
So as scary as it is, and I'm terrified, it's also, we also know that movement will not stop from, and no matter what. There might be more violence. There will be more violence. Keep it moving.
Just going back to a point you made, kind of about trauma and the response to it. I think that was something I noticed a lot throughout the film was, the community coming together, art being created out of this pain, humor is found constantly throughout the film. I just wonder if you could just talk a bit about that and the relationship to the film.
Yeah, that was like the first thing I fell in love with when I saw the early footage. Will and Ash made it a point not to live in the trauma, right? You don't see any of if you want to look at how Dante Wright was murdered, right? You can see it. It's available. You want to look at George Floyd, you've seen it already.
Right.
We did not want to relive any of that trauma, right? And that was a very clear decision that they made very early on, right? And we actually, and there were actually moments where we were like, maybe we should, because there's also this other side where if you show somebody, if you show the violence, right, that there is a visceral reaction to that, and maybe it people take the film more seriously, but we were all pretty strongly on the side of we don't want to relive the trauma.
Yeah.
And so in not reliving the trauma, it meant that we're offering another answer to this, right?
Another way to look at this,
it's funny, right? Like when you see typical social justice films, and it's just like a lot of protesting,
B-roll,
right, which is compelling shit, right? Like, don't get me wrong, but all of those people who protest also laugh,
right?
Right.
Yeah.
All those people who protest also dance, and the joy is just as important as the the voice that you're using to fight the system. You have to have the joy too. And when you don't have when it's absent of the joy, you're actually losing part of the humanity of the struggle, And so it was a choice to have the moment where they're doing the wobble, right? It was a choice. It's like, Toshira, who who's the person that I fell in love with in the film,
God,
right?
yeah.
And she, in the moment of her describing the hardest moment of her life, right? One of the next early scenes is her looking at the mirror and being like,
I love that.
why they draw him like that, And that's real, right?
Yes,
And that's
100%.
Toshira, that's who she is, right? And so it is, it's important to show the full human, right? It's not, people aren't one-sided.
And that full picture of the community as well.
Absolutely.
It's these women, but it's also the community coming together to do these beautiful acts.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting because it's so many documentaries and also fiction that's about these horrible things that sadly the black community has to face. You know, the full scope of experience, like you said, you know, it can be very limited at times, and it's like there's so much. There isn't sadness without the joy of it of life, the joy of life. There isn't, you know, to show these different sides in this complete world. Like, you know, I love how you're in their apartments sometimes, you know, and there's like an expanse of like so many things happening. Literally, sometimes it makes me think of like the split screen. Like, even though, like,
exactly.
I mean, to pivot to that, you know, it's, you know, you have, you know, all these like events that go on within the scope of two screens side by side, and sometimes they contradict each other. I just, even though I'm going to step away from the technique of it, because you produce this. Not to say there's no creative element that a producer is involved in. Being a documentary producer and documentary director, what would you say are some distinctions?
Ooh,
That's a good question.
that's a good question. I think there's a lot of similarities. I think documentary. Hold on. Yes, documentary producer and documentary director.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was thinking. So for sure. Well, one thing I'll say is that every director that I've worked with is also a producer, right? Like,
Nice.
I work with Antonino. Antonino's a producer, right? Will and Ash are producers on this project, right? Like, I think obviously as a director, you're really focused on the story. You're really focused on the characters. I think with documentary, it shifts a little bit from scripted because like you actually, the relationship that the director has with the subjects is like critical. And so you have to sort of, you're building trust is really what it is.
Yeah.
And because obviously the more people are comfortable, usually the better the footage is or whatever. And as a producer, really, I'm there to make sure everything that the director envisions, like can happen. And so my priorities are different, right? It's like when I'm on set, I'm a part of what's going on in terms of the interview or in terms of the shot, but I'm also thinking about the schedule. I'm also thinking about, logistics stuff. I'm also thinking about, permissions and all that stuff. And so, that's sort of the main part of my mind. Whereas the director's main part of their mind is like
Capturing that story.
exactly,
Right.
exactly. And so, but most of the films that I've worked on have been tight teams, and so I think the most important thing, honestly, outside of just director and producer, is that everybody on set, everybody's there for the right reasons, and I think that goes all the way down to the PA, right? That folks are there because they believe in the story, not just for a check. Because I think there's some projects where that's fine, right? You're gonna do, no offense to reality TV, you're gonna do reality TV.
I hope the check is
Right,
there.
exactly. The check better be there, right?
Check better be.
And on time.
Right, and on time, right? Don't give me no net 120 bullshit.
And don't tax it.
Right. But the films that I work on are all, I choose to work on the films that, I'm not. Obviously I do, for hire stuff as well, but I'm not gonna work on a documentary that I don't believe in because I actually just can't do it. I don't have it in me.
I feel that. Yeah.
I can't do it,
Can't
right?
bullshit
I
for
can't
that
every
long,
day, and be lying to myself. I can't do this.
It's just you have to look in the mirror and be like, yes, I do believe.
Right, right. Like it has to be an adventure, right?
Right.
Admittedly, when I did the Roberta Flack documentary, I wasn't a huge fan of Roberta Flack when I started that film.
Interesting.
And it wasn't that that I didn't like her music.
Right.
I just didn't know.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, but for me, the end point, I'm a hip hop head, and the Fugees are my
Yep.
favorite rap
nice.
group,
Yep.
right?
Love it.
And so, and I had, so of course I knew Roberta's music through
Lauren.
Lauren, right?
Yeah.
And I knew, there's all like some of the like, first time ever I saw her face, like those, like I knew them, but like wasn't sure what the story was when I started, but I know that there's a story there, and I was very excited to find out what that story was going to be. And so, and so that adventure, and Antonino, who he is he's just a music, philosopher as far as I'm concerned. He knows like every album, every song. And so even just the conversations with him was enough for me to like, be like, okay, yeah, no, this is going to be good.
Thank you so much for listening to Uptown Films podcast. Please rate and review our podcast on Spotify. Make sure to follow us on social media, Uptown Films _pod on Instagram. We're going to have a TikTok page soon. And we also have a YouTube channel, which you can follow, Uptown Films. Please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell to be notified of future videos. We are going to be uploading new episodes and clips each week. New episodes drop on Fridays, and there are clips throughout the week. Thank you. We've both made documentaries. Mine on literacy. You've made several, produced several, directed. I want to know what part of, let's say, the post documentary, like the role of the impact producer, have you played any part in that in terms of, for those of you who don't know, our listeners, an impact producer, they're tasked with, if it's a social impact documentary, getting that documentary to the target audience, doing all of the work, a part of distribution, other facets of distribution, educational, so on and so forth. Have you played any roles as an impact producer getting the film out there?
Yeah, for sure. So, I'll just start with saying documentary filmmaking is tough.
Yes, it is.
It is not like, and then you think about like, even when you get paid your rate, like, how many hours have you spent on this? Like, you have been paid minimum wage for you. Like, guarantee you got paid with all the hours that you spent versus like
The math, it doesn't work.
right.
out.
You do the math. You're like, wait a minute. But to that
Greg's
point,
just
right?
shaking
I'm
his
sorry,
head,
Greg.
yeah.
There's so much that goes into it. It's like, even to get it off the
Right. And so, all right, you developed this film. You went through pre-production. You did all the fucking production. You did post that almost fucking killed you, right? And then
Literally, my back.
right. And then you're like, okay, finally, here's the film. And then you're supposed to do more work after that. And I ain't gonna lie, like I like by the time it's at, it's like when we did Roberta, we finished that film and we were on a tight deadline. We did it. My favorite moment was Warner Media was one of the people who helped us with the funding of the film, and if you go to their new building in Hudson Yards,
Yep.
there's actually a floor that's just a fucking multiplex, like it's just theaters, right? Like
And they have symposiums
Right,
there,
yeah.
summits. It's amazing.
Jesus.
Yeah, and so and Roberta, who throughout the film was had a lot of health issues, but we were able to get we got one of those theaters. We rented out. We actually had 2 theaters, so Roberta and her team can watch it privately.
Wow.
Nice.
And
awesome.
and really like that's all I needed, right? She she had an emotional reaction to the film, and we got to like she got to see it, and
That's incredible.
Nice.
and right on time too. But to your question, like I think Roberta, for the most part, we just had to get it out there. We didn't, there was no real like social impact plan after that. For us, it was really about making sure that Roberta saw it, her people saw it, and that the world got to see it. It was on, PBS American Masters. A lot of folks saw it, right? Now with The People's Way, this is sort of our our goal. Is to, it has to. The film calls for it to have a social impact campaign, and really Will and Ash, like that's almost the main reason why, I would say the main reason why they did it. And so this is going to be my, to answer your question, this is going to be my first time with a film that that really calls for a campaign. Now, all that said, I come from a background of activism. My dad, who retired maybe 8 years ago, was the vice chair of the Communist Party in America.
Hell yeah.
Oh, hell yeah. We got a comedy on the podcast, guys. Comedy on the podcast.
Red diaper baby.
Nice.
And my mom too, like not just black radical, like just and so I've been in these spaces a long time. That's a lot of the reason why I make the films I make, right? It's like because this is my background. And so, and I'm plugged into a lot of these movements. And so it's going to be exciting with this film. Like back to what I was talking about before around this idea of like joy and care for the community. Yeah. Like, I think we get to use some of that thinking when we're talking about social impact, right? Yep. So it's not just like, enter into protest spaces and and show this film. It's like we're offering a new world here, and people get to enter that and have a lot of questions and have a lot of collaboration and connection around it. So
and it really quick follow up. It goes back to what the Black Panthers were doing in the '60s. Oh, we're going to set up this free medical clinic. There's this free space here for food distribution,
free lunches for children.
I mean, come on, and it's I like the way watching the film, it goes, here's the introduction of what we're going into. Here are the main people we're following. But now let's get into what they're saying. And then the next time we see them, it's like, okay, we can have our space where there are no Derek Chauvins, or we're not terrorized by these folks, because we can care for each other. And, whenever you read the log line of a film, you're like, okay, do I want to see this movie? And reading it, there's certain operative words that stuck out with me. It's essentially interweaving the journeys to care and then inner healing. And it's like, because you need reflection and time to process and to go, okay, well, how can not only we avoid this disastrous moment that's, etched into our minds for eternity, but in addition to that, how can we move forward and progress and have a better society? So I guess my question to you is the receptions of your work, reception of this film, how do you think, I guess, big picture and documentaries play a role in providing, that semblance of inner healing and conversation and making it. We make the film to inform, but also how can it have a substantial or impact in our current day communities?
Yeah, I mean, I think documentaries just play that role now more than ever, right? Amazon is striking right now. The Union film came out. Well, the Union film came out it won Sundance last year, but they're introducing it right now, right? So like you get to this is a example of a film that talked about the first Amazon warehouse to be unionized, and now we're seeing it in real time. 100%. And so that's what, I think documentary now more than ever kind of leads the way in that space where it's just like, it's going to push society in a certain direction. And again, I've been fighting police brutality since I was in high school, right? Like Abner Louima, Amadou Diallo, and so we've been doing this for a while, right? Sean Bell. And I think that what I love about the People's Way is that it just offers, there's some alternatives offered there, and it's like not just about us, it is about the abolition movement for sure, but it's also about, taking care of ourselves, as you said, Greg, and so, that's where we're at.
Yeah, I think really quickly, about documentary today, I think, at least for people of my generation, I find that a lot of people my age are watching video essays or documentaries instead of reading articles about something. So it really is like a way people genuinely get their information on subjects. So I think it's super important to have films like this. And also just talking about community, how community is protected, who has the power within that. Those were some themes that really jumped out to me while I was watching. Who decides how a community is protected? Who decides what that protection looks like? What is protection? What is justice?
There's a lot of like contradictions to be negotiated and discussed.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different points of view. And I think also to go back to the impact production part of this and the call to action within the film, one of the biggest things that stood out to me was one of the women who worked at George Floyd Square, not Janelle, but one of the other volunteers there, while everyone was waiting for the Derek Chauvin verdict, she was saying,
Right.
okay, what's next? This doesn't matter. And 4 years later, she's 100% fucking right. And, what is going on in the community now that it's not popular to do this anymore? So I think that call to action is incredibly important.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, I get it. I'm also, again, somebody who's been in this movement for my whole life, and people get burned out, and like even now, as somebody who's still very much in this fight, I can't watch like the acts of violence on Black bodies. I can't watch that shit no more. I can't do it.
Depressing.
And I hate to say that because it's, the people who live it, like who am I to say I can't watch that, right? But at the end of the day, I think it is, it's like this is, not to use the cliche, but it is a marathon, right? You have to continue. The forces that are fighting against us are continuing to fight against us. We have to continue to fight, and we have to have the energy and the belief that what we're doing is not just a changing the system, but also helping ourselves, Absolutely. And so that's the push.
A quote that stood out to me as well was, I've gotten more pushback than help. Something Janelle said. And, not to change the subject into something completely different, honestly, but it reminded me a lot of with you, Greg, and the BICC, and somebody saying to Janelle, "You had a year to hire an employee. Why didn't you?" Well, I mean, you don't really get what I'm trying to do. Clearly, you don't understand what what starting an organization is like.
There's what you're doing, and then there's like 1,000 other people are doing this, getting your way.
Yeah,
right.
But it's
such a powerful quote. More pushback than help.
And I wonder if you could speak a little on from your perspective, just starting your own organization and how difficult that actually is. How long of a path that is.
I'll just list out these things. I'll speak from the eye, but then I'll also speak from, and I'll rub my hand close to the mic, skin color. You're born into a world where you're already labeled and etched with barriers. I grew up working class. I don't have seed funds. I don't have seed money. Who do I know that's a millionaire? I don't know anybody that's a millionaire. I did grow up around children of millionaires because my mother worked at the Y in Riverdale in the Bronx when I was a kid, so around a lot of Jewish kids. And I say that not for any means of anti-Semitism or anything like that, but it's the simple case of social class. So you're around a group of people that are more well off and are united. And kind of talking about this documentary, it's unity and healing and keeping things together. Their local economy is robust. Juxtapose Riverdale with growing up in Highbridge, which has been the last 20 years poorest congressional district in the country, up there with parts of Louisiana and Mississippi. I'm an only child, but I have two parents. I won the lottery. However, in forming an organization and trying to get it to bring a cinema to a cinema desert, which would take millions of dollars, and rallying people of all different walks of life in a very diverse area in the Bronx, it is difficult. And that quote of receiving more, pushback than support rings true, because you have to rally people around something, and then there's a finite amount of time that they're going to be interested in being involved in it until they see, I really want to commit it to this. I want to volunteer. Yeah, this is going to take 5 to 7 years. Not going to happen in 5 to 7 months.
Yeah.
It's going to take battles and a lot of no's. A lot of grants we're going to have to apply to. A lot of meetings we're going to have. A lot of no's and people dismissing us.
You said something there. Grants, right?
Yeah.
And working with city government, local government. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's difficult. And also the simple fact of somebody telling me to my face, you're going to be the executive director? How many times specifically, and now taking this off of me, black women are doubted as leaders within their own community and then people outside the community. So
It's unfortunate.
That was another thing that stuck out as well, is that gender gap within the community and the generational divide as well.
Yeah.
And this is,
Especially in that generational divide in that scene where
Great.
they're all debating question 2.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite scenes.
Yeah.
That was great.
Yeah, I mean, this is, it's funny because, all these organizations have been around for a long time, right? I mean, you think about the Black Panthers, you think about, obviously I was in socialist communist spaces, and, folks are just trying to do the right thing, and we know that. But oftentimes it's really hard, especially around sexism, for like they know academically that sexism is wrong, but then like internally, there's just like it's much harder for them to unpack, for men really to unpack that stuff and
internalized misogyny.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you got to that was part of what played out, at George Floyd Square, was that there's just folks who haven't really done that work.
Yeah. No, I thought that was framed really well.
It was.
In terms of the two movements like pitted against each other.
Yeah.
Also, before we go, 2 things. One, I know it seems like kind of like a diverting from the subject, but we're still talking about film. Yeah. Like any filmmakers or big influences on you, documentary or narrative or just.
Yeah, I mean, you see my hoodie, right?
I wanted to ask you, you got to talk about your hoodie. What
I'm still not over it. I'm still not over it. Radio Raheem was right.
Get him the 20D batteries.
Right, exactly.
2 slices.
All right. Actually, it was bugging out. He was the one who was like, "Nah, this ain't right." Actually, there's a pizzeria in Brooklyn that was like pretty close to where I lived, and I was looking up there, and I was like, "That's right, you do got a black person up there." I know, you know what's about to happen. Y'all know.
Spike took so much shit for that.
I thought you were gonna say there's a pizza place near me that's super similar to this.
Nah, where we going? I would have wilded out. I would be like, "Why aren't there any black people on your wall?" But yeah, I would say like probably one of my biggest influences is Spike Lee for sure.
Yeah, he's awesome.
And also as like somebody who did like obviously great scripted content, but also did like amazing documentaries at the same time, right before the levees broke.
I was gonna say I've been meaning to watch that.
Yeah. And so I mean, Spike, Charles Burnett also.
Celebrated, underrated filmmaker.
Absolutely. Alfonso Cuarón.
Itu
Mama también.
Yeah, Itu Mama también, yes.
And Children of Men.
Children of Men is like my favorite film ever.
That's a really
I
great
watched
film.
that and then I immediately watched it again.
Yeah. I mean, who's the cinematographer?
Emmanuel Lubezki.
Emmanuel Lubezki.
Yeah. I mean, God.
It's the camera work is incredible.
They have a new I guess it came out this year, but it's on Apple TV. It's a mini series. I was like,
of that?
it's called. It's just the same combination.
My bad.
So I was like, I gotta see that. But
Children
yeah.
of Men miniseries might hit.
Oh, yo, look, speak it into existence. It really would. That's a
Right? I know. Like to go into that world.
all right. Don't release this. Edit that part out so we can be the ones.
Yes.
To come up with,
We'll just roll into Apple TV one
right,
day. where
like
it's
we got an idea. We got an idea. It came up. We was in the Bronx. We in Port Morris.
we heard you were looking for something.
Just here, edit that part out, please.
They can never know. Just here. Nice.
But yeah. I mean, I'm attracted to filmmakers who I mean, visual stuff. I'm a big fan of. But yeah, it's like people who take, real social issues and try to present it in an artistic way, which I think.
Yeah.
Again, not to keep bringing it back to People's Way. It's like that's what Ash and Will really were able to accomplish.
Yeah.
That they took a really hard subject and they actually shot it in a very.
It's one of the most beautiful documentaries I've seen. Yeah.
Looks very.
The colors, the reds were like incredible.
Yeah. Shout out to Tam.
Yeah. No.
Colorist.
Yeah. Incredible.
Killed that.
Also, so in terms of distribution, what's the path to that look like? And also, have you landed the distributor? Where can we find it if possible? Or?
Yeah, so we're working on it now, but really, we decide that we want to make sure that it stays in theaters as long as possible.
Yeah,
like
Theatrical release, yeah.
I avoided theaters for a while because of COVID, and then I realized there's this big fundamental difference about being in theater where you cannot be on your phone.
More immersed.
Right. But what's really cool about that is that like, especially a film like this, that like you want to look everything up, right? Like, it's like these things happened a couple of years ago. So like, people would look it up, but you can't do that in the theater. You actually have to be like, no, I'm here with the characters. I'm here. And I think this film is, I know documentaries, as they say, like don't do well in the theaters, whatever.
Yeah.
I want this film to be in the theaters as long as possible.
Nice.
And, we already have 3 or 4 other film festivals that have taken it. I can't announce it yet. But the plan is really to make sure that folks can see it in the theaters. And then, and then from there, we're hoping to build momentum and choose the right distributor from there.
Hell
That's awesome. I love to hear that. Yeah.
And have to ask you 2 things. What elements of the Bronx make it into your work? And when can we start talking about screenings, People's Way in the Bronx next year?
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, for sure, it's coming to the Bronx, for sure. It's definitely coming to Harlem, too. But
Uptown.
Yeah, Uptown all day.
Keep it uptown.
I mean, that's a good question, though.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Elements of the Bronx in my work.
I would like to ask, this is what Sophie and I at the beginning of this documentary, it's a podcast, we wanted to make sure, we also did the documentary together. We asked filmmakers, what are your connections to the Bronx and how do elements of the Bronx make it into your work?
Yeah, so, I put up the X, but like real Bronx people, like sometimes they're like, put that shit down. But I'm like, yo, I know I've only lived here for 2 years. It's true.
Politicians be
I've
sleazy.
only been here since August.
Oh, so there you go. But yeah, I grew up in Harlem. So the Bronx, I can sit, like, it's Uptown, right? It's like, we're all part of the same community. Every day, I went to school in Spanish Harlem. Every day I went down, took the bus down and saw Yankee Stadium across the river. That was my childhood. And so, I would say what I love about living up here and how it's connected to my work is that there's a way in which where I live now is the closest to what I grew up in Harlem, in the 80s and 90s. And there's parts of that you can consider like a negative connotation for sure. But actually the thing that really holds true is just the sense of people being very like real and loving.
Yes.
Like no, like
Absolutely.
you know, I lived in a lot of different neighborhoods in the city. You know, I lived in Brooklyn for 15 years. I don't get the same connection. Like people are literally just like wanting to connect with you on the street. You know, and to me, that is, you know, that's the type of New York that I really love. And so. Yeah, I take that in my work. I take that wherever I
can
go.
definitely see that in the film. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
just the importance of people.
Real sense of community and passion. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Listen, man, this is awesome. You know, like I'm excited to see what this how this doc turns out in this release, further on in its release, and I'm excited to see people engage with it beyond that. You know, whether it's streaming or physical media. You know, like that's not dead. Let's keep it alive.
Yeah,
Keep it in
all
theaters
day.
too.
The People's Way, like the gas station on the cover, that'd be a good DVD cover.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Have you screened at the People's Film Festival in Harlem?
No, we we had a certain strategy. I don't know if it's the right strategy, to be honest, but it's always hard. You know, I mean, you've done the film festival, run, and so it's like, how do you, people are like, save the world premiere for this festival,
Right.
And so we were very like, okay, our first time around, we targeted specific festivals. But now, after we did Doc NYC, so we're like, okay, the second time around, anybody who wants to film, like, as long as it's a real festival, we would love to screen. So yeah, I mean, the People's Way at the People's Film Festival. I mean, come on now.
How was that? You're at the largest documentary film festival in the country,
Right.
in New York, and high praise, yes. Congratulations,
Thank
great work.
you, thank you.
It's
Yeah, and I
incredible.
appreciate this. This has been fun.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for coming